Hey everyone, this is Robin with Heroes Legend Studios, and I'm coming back with a behind the scenes video of Koitsugi Legend of the Water Guardian. This is a game I'm working with Blindcast Studios on. Been working on it for a few years now, and I spent the last year refactoring a lot of our code, learning Unity some more, and getting in depth about building these better building blocks. So I'm going to go over that with something called our proximity explosion. I'm going to show you how I put it together, how our developers are going to be putting together our scripts. You can check that out here, what it's going to look like. As everyone knows, I'm working with Blind Cat Studios on Koitsugi Legend of the Water Guardian. So don't forget, check out the link in our description. Go wishlist the game on Steam today. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my description and bio for more social media links so you can follow me all around. And check out my live streams on YouTube and Twitch. So now you've seen the final results. I'm going to show you some of the components that we use to build that and some of the concepts that I'm working on expanding and building these building blocks, these fundamental components that we use to put such an effect together. I'm not going to dive deep into all of our code, all the components that I'm using for this effect, just the concepts. And I want to keep this quick, just at a developer, level designer overview, so everyone gets an idea of what we're doing behind the scenes and how we're developing this game. The idea here is that we have a proximity explosion. We're going to use our core components to develop this, and I'm going to talk about all those components and how I put them together and the general idea of what kind of components we want to build. So the idea here is that we have this proximity explosion. We have an area that if the player gets too close, it starts a timer. When that timer elapses, it's going to trigger the explosion, and if the player is in range, it will deal damage to the player. So all we need is that trigger event. When the player enters, they're within range. When they leave that trigger zone, they're out of range. So with our current implementation, our components that are available at this time, and again, we're still expanding a lot. There's still more that's needed, but we can do a lot with what we have. So with that explanation, I have a trigger event that when the player enters that trigger zone, it's going to start a timer. And again, it could be anything. We can have a mask that looks for a player and the enemy. So even when an enemy enters this zone, they're going to trigger the timer. Okay. Our trigger event script is very flexible. It allows and keeps tracks of any tags that come into the trigger zone, when they leave the trigger, when they stay, and then also can track game objects for our game object collector. So when the player enters that trigger zone, we're going to start a timer. And what we're going to do is that we can see that we have a timer event that we're telling to start, right? We have this timer class. Another item that we have is a light animator that we're going to tell when that timer starts, or when we enter that trigger zone, we're going to start this flashing animation on our spotlight. You can see our spotlights right here too. And that script is here. Okay. And we have our explosion, right? So these are like core components that we're just adding. We're building this proximity explosion game object with multiple components here, putting together these building blocks. So once we start it, we're going to also say, hey, you know what? We actually want to keep track of that game object that has entered our trigger zone. Okay. And for this instance, it's going to be our player, but according to our mask, it can also be enemies, right? And then if that game object leaves, we tell that collector to remove those objects. So only that objects that are within that list, that collector list, will be affected. So we add and remove as needed. Cool. And again, use that trigger event as needed, right? We have the timer events. We tell this timer to start ticking. We have a delay of 2, so it's going to elapse on after 2 seconds. It's going to trigger the timer event. We can loop this. We can have it start on start as well, and then continue and loop on from there if we want. So when that timer elapses, just like that ticking time bomb, we've got 2 seconds to get out of that zone. We see it flashing. We want to say, okay, we have our proximity explosion. It's going to call that collector object here, which we're going to look at next, and it's an event on objects. So it just triggers an event on those objects, and we'll go over that next. We're going to tell the light animator to stop animating, so it's going to turn it off. Our explosion is going to play because now the time has elapsed. We want to explode. Again, we don't have sounds right now, but in the future you would just add another sound here, just by adding another Unity event or linking that in to an audio player or whatever it may be. Next, we have our damage object collector. We also have a game object collector. This is going to be a subclass of that game object collector. It's actively adding, removing, based on those trigger events, a list of game objects. Right now, it's just going to collect our player. If a player leaves the zone, it just means they're not going to get damaged. So right now, we've added this explosion damage. We have this scriptable object called damage data that deals damage, and we're looking for any object that has like a die damage interface. Okay, a lot of standard stuff. So not going to jump into the nitty gritty of the code, but that's the general idea how it works. We have our explosion. Nothing really here, just our particle system. We tell it to play, and it's gonna like explode like that. Real basic. We have our spotlight, which is disabled right now. When the player enters the zone, it's gonna start flashing. And then we have this little light animator. Again, all for Unity events, you need to have a lot of public and methods so that you can call them from the Unity event system.